You have used this concept to explain someone else. Today, probably. Someone said something confidently wrong, and the word came to mind immediately. Dunning-Kruger. You used it as a diagnosis. A label. An explanation that closed the question rather than opened it. The problem is not that you are wrong about the other person. The problem is the asymmetry. You applied the concept outward. The concept applies inward just as reliably. That is the part nobody mentions. You have probably used it in the last week. At work. In a group chat. Reading the news. And it is the part David Dunning himself considers the most important finding in the original paper. 1999. David Dunning and Justin Kruger were at Cornell University. Dunning had been struck by a news story. A man named MacArthur Wheeler had robbed 2 banks in Pittsburgh in broad daylight. Wheeler had a theory. He had read somewhere that lemon juice could be used as invisible ink. He extrapolated. If it made ink invisible on paper, it would make his face invisible on film. When police showed him the tape, he was genuinely confused. He had rubbed lemon juice on his face before the robbery. He believed it would make him invisible to cameras. He was not mentally ill. He was simply, catastrophically wrong about something he was completely confident about. The detective who told Dunning about the story added one detail that stuck. Wheeler was not surprised that he had been caught. He was surprised that the cameras had seen him. Dunning's question was precise. If you are too incompetent to perform a task correctly, are you also too incompetent to recognize that you performed it incorrectly? The same skills required to do something well are, in many cases, the same skills required to evaluate how well you did it. If those skills are absent, the failure and the inability to see the failure arrive together. Dunning called this a metacognitive deficit. A failure not of knowledge but of the awareness of knowledge. You do not know what you do not know. More precisely, you cannot feel the absence of what you do not know. This is structurally different from simply being wrong. Being wrong with awareness is correctable. Being wrong without awareness of the wrongness is not. Dunning and Kruger tested this across 4 studies. They used humor, logical reasoning, and English grammar as the skill domains. Participants completed tests and then estimated how they had performed compared to other participants. The bottom quartile, those who scored in the lowest 25%, estimated they had performed around the 62nd percentile. They were performing at roughly the 12th percentile. They overestimated their performance by 50 percentile points. The top quartile, those who scored in the highest 25%, also misjudged their performance. In the opposite direction. High performers consistently underestimated how well they had done relative to others. They assumed the tasks that felt easy to them must also feel easy to everyone. The paper was not about incompetent people being overconfident. It was about the poor connection between actual performance and self-assessment across the entire spectrum. Both errors, overestimation and underestimation, both coming from the same source. The limited access humans have to accurate self-knowledge. Dunning and Kruger also tested whether training could close the gap. They gave bottom quartile participants feedback on the correct answers, effectively teaching them the skills they lacked. After training, those participants became significantly better at assessing their own performance, which confirmed the original thesis. The same skills that enabled good performance also enabled accurate self-assessment. The paper won the Ig Nobel Prize in 2000. A prize given for research that makes you laugh, and then makes you think. The name stuck. The graph did not. If you have seen a representation of the Dunning-Kruger effect, you have almost certainly seen a graph. A mountain peak early on, then a long valley, then a gradual climb. That graph does not appear in the original 1999 paper. Not in any form. Dunning and Kruger measured 2 data points. Low performers overestimated. High performers underestimated. No mountain. No valley. No slope. The iconic graph is a post hoc cultural invention. It became so widespread that most people who cite the effect are citing the graph, not the paper. The graph itself is a demonstration of the effect it claims to illustrate. People confident enough to share it have usually not read what it is supposedly summarizing. The graph spread because it told a flattering story. It implied that the problem belongs to a specific group. Beginners. The unskilled. People who have not yet reached your level of understanding. That is precisely what the original paper did not say. The graph made the effect comfortable by making it about someone else. Subscribe. This channel is built for exactly the kind of thinking you are doing right now. In 2020, Gignac and Zajenkowski published a critique that went further than any previous challenge to the original study. Their argument was statistical. When you ask people to estimate their performance relative to others, the data will always show a pattern that looks like the Dunning-Kruger effect. Even if you generate the data randomly. Even if there is no actual relationship between skill and self-assessment. The reason is a mathematical phenomenon called regression to the mean. Bottom scorers can only estimate upward. Top scorers can only estimate downward. The pattern emerges from the structure of the measurement, not necessarily from something real. This was a serious challenge. If the effect is a statistical artifact, it cannot be used to make claims about human cognition. Gignac and Zajenkowski showed this by running a simulation. They generated completely random data, with no actual relationship between skill and self-assessment, and then applied the same analysis Dunning and Kruger had used. The result looked like the Dunning-Kruger effect, which means the pattern alone cannot be used as evidence that the cognitive phenomenon is real. Dunning responded. He did not dismiss the critique. He pointed to a different body of evidence. Studies on cardiopulmonary resuscitation training showed that people who performed poorly on post-training tests also rated their own performance significantly higher. Studies on medical diagnosis accuracy showed physicians who made more errors were systematically less aware that they had made errors. Studies on susceptibility to fake news showed that people who were most likely to believe false information were also least likely to recognize their own susceptibility. Dunning's position is not that the original study is beyond criticism. It is that the effect it identified shows up reliably in real-world domains where the stakes are high. He also pointed to studies on political knowledge. People who knew least about policy consistently rated their own political understanding highest, and were most resistant to information that contradicted their existing views. That last finding, resistance to corrective information, is what Dunning considers the most consequential real-world expression of the effect. The debate between the original finding and the statistical critique has not been resolved. Both positions have serious researchers behind them. Whether or not the original methodology holds, the underlying question remains: how reliably can any person assess their own competence in real time? And the answer from decades of research across multiple fields is consistent. Poorly. Often very poorly. This is not about incompetent people. This is about all people, including the people who understand this research most deeply. Dunning himself has written about this. His follow-up work focuses not on the bottom quartile but on the structural problem of self-assessment in general. His argument is that the brain does not have a separate module for evaluating its own performance. It uses the same cognitive tools it used to perform the task in the first place, which means the evaluation is never fully independent of the performance. You are grading your own test with the same pen you used to write it. A 1981 study by Ola Svensson found that 93% of American drivers rated themselves as above-average drivers. Mathematically, most of them were wrong. A similar pattern appears in studies on academic performance, negotiation skill, and financial decision-making. The domains change. The overestimation pattern does not. This applies to experts. Studies on experienced radiologists show that confidence in a diagnosis correlates poorly with diagnostic accuracy. Studies on experienced judges show that confidence in a sentencing decision does not reliably predict the decision's legal soundness. Studies on professional investors show that the most confident predictions are not the most accurate ones. Experience reduces the gap. It does not close it. And it does not eliminate the fundamental problem of using the same cognitive system for both performance and evaluation. What expertise does produce is a better calibration in the specific domain of expertise. A chess grandmaster has excellent self-assessment of chess ability. That same grandmaster may have no better self-assessment of their driving ability than anyone else. Now, the contemporary amplifier. Social media platforms reward confidence, not competence, not accuracy, confidence. A post that says "I am certain this is what happened" gets more engagement than a post that says "the evidence suggests this but I am not fully sure." The algorithm does not have a mechanism for evaluating epistemic accuracy. It has a mechanism for evaluating engagement. Confidence produces engagement. Engagement produces reach. Reach produces more confidence. The platform has built an environment where the signal that something is wrong, low engagement, low reach, low validation, is completely decoupled from whether it is actually wrong. This is not the Dunning-Kruger effect. But it is what happens when you build infrastructure optimized for the wrong output on top of a population that already has limited access to accurate self-assessment. The result is a feedback system that selects for overconfidence and punishes calibrated uncertainty. A 2022 study from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology found that false news stories spread 6 times faster than true ones on major social platforms. The researchers noted that false stories tended to be more novel and emotionally engaging. Research published in 2023 found that on major social platforms, confident misinformation spread significantly faster than accurate but hedged information. The people spreading it are not, in most cases, deliberately lying. They are doing what the platform rewards. They are being confident. The architecture of confidence, short declarative sentences, no hedging, no qualifications, is also the architecture of effective misinformation. The two are structurally indistinguishable from the outside. Here is the loop that Dunning's later work describes, and that most discussions of the effect entirely miss. You see someone be confidently wrong. You apply the label Dunning-Kruger. You feel the satisfaction of having correctly identified a cognitive bias in someone else. That satisfaction is itself a signal worth examining. The confidence with which you diagnose someone else's overconfidence. Dunning has been explicit about this in interviews. The effect is not a tool for evaluating others. It is a reminder of your own limitations. The people most likely to use the phrase to dismiss someone else are, by the logic of the paper, exhibiting the very pattern the paper describes. They are confident in their assessment of someone else's competence without being able to fully evaluate the accuracy of that assessment. There is a version of this that is easy to accept intellectually and hard to apply personally. Most people who encounter this research nod along and then continue using the concept as a label for other people. This is not a gotcha. It is the most useful implication of the research if you take it seriously. The question the paper should leave you with is not, who around me has poor metacognition? It is, in which domains do I? And the honest answer, the answer supported by the full body of research including Dunning's own follow-up work, is probably more than you think. The research on calibration suggests a specific practice. Before stating a position confidently, estimate your probability of being right. Then track those estimates over time against outcomes. People who do this consistently become significantly better calibrated over months and years. Not perfect. Better. The gap narrows through deliberate exposure to feedback. There is a practical implication here that goes beyond self-awareness as an abstract virtue. Dunning's later research identified the conditions under which self-assessment becomes more accurate. External feedback from people with genuine expertise in the domain. Not validation. Not agreement. Feedback that is calibrated to actual performance rather than to social comfort. The problem is that this kind of feedback is rare. Most social environments, including professional ones, are optimized for comfort rather than calibration. People who offer accurate critical feedback are often described as difficult, harsh, or unsupportive. People who offer comfortable validation are described as mentors. The result is that most people move through their careers in domains where their self-assessment is never seriously stress-tested. They accumulate confidence. They do not necessarily accumulate competence at the same rate. The gap persists. Dunning and Kruger did not find that incompetent people are confident. That is the version that became a meme. They found that competence and self-assessment are poorly connected. In everyone. At every skill level. The top quartile underestimated. The bottom quartile overestimated. Both errors. Both from the same structural limitation. Whether the original methodology was statistically flawless or not, that underlying reality has been confirmed across enough domains to be taken seriously. The statistical debate about the original methodology will likely continue. That is how science works. But the question the methodology was trying to answer is not going away. Can you reliably evaluate your own competence? And if not, what structures can you put around yourself to compensate for that limitation? You have used this concept to explain someone else. That is where we started. The more useful question is, in which domain did you last receive feedback that genuinely challenged your self-assessment? And what did you do with it? Dunning and Kruger did not find that incompetent people are confident. They found that competence and self-assessment are poorly connected. In everyone. Including you. Including them. The concept you have been using to explain other people applies to you with exactly the same force. That asymmetry, the way you applied it outward and not inward, is the most important thing the paper found. And the thing most people who cite it have never noticed.